To those of you who have joined us via our live stream, welcome. We're delighted that, first off, happy to be back. Nice to have you all with us. I think many of you know the custom here at Topical Torah is that from 12 to 12:30, lunchtime. So our folks are kind of rolling in, and many are bringing lunch with them and enjoying pleasant conversation with each other. We just want to invite you to do the same. Grab yourself a bite to eat, perhaps, maybe a little something to drink, and we will be starting our program with Elia Kaplan at the bottom of the hour, 12:30.
Hi, I can. Can you hear me?
Outstanding, we hear you. Yes. So we may, Al, can we turn up the sound from the, I want to make sure in the room they can hear her more easily. Oh yeah, thank you so much for doing this. It's a crazy hour in the middle of the night. You're very, very nice person. We were new to
My
this.
pleasure.
We were new to this is the work you do, but now you're really a very nice person. Thank you for coming to us. It's 10 o'clock.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. Okay, well, this is not great. This is Merlin, who is quite determined to interrupt. Maybe I should kick him out, but
If you like, you can send some material for me to produce about another time. We'd be happy to include Merlin by introduction in the remarks.
wonderful.
So where in Israel do you live?
I live right in the center. I live on King George,
Oh, wow.
near Bezalel, yeah.
King George, near where?
King George what?
Near where?
Near Bezalel. and Hillel Street, Ben Yehuda. Oh, no kidding. Yeah. Mm. It's a pretty great location, I have to say. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Have you, I don't know actually, have you been to the Mifal? Do you know the Mifal? I work there all the time. I was there this afternoon. Great space, yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Quite a lot of back and forth. Well, if you are in town, you should look me up. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, excellent. All right, so I'll log back on in 23 minutes. I'll see you then. Okay. Bye.
Greetings to our friends who have joined us via the live stream. You are in the right place. Topical Torah is due to begin the program at the bottom of the hour, 12:30. This is lunchtime, and so our in-person gang has been gathering, banana in hand, and enjoying their lunch and a little conversation with each other. We encourage you to get a little bite to eat, a little something to drink, and our program will begin at 12:30 with Elia Kaplan from Jerusalem. Greetings to all of you who are with us via our live stream. It is 12:12, and that means that we are still 18 minutes away from beginning our program in person and on live stream. The program begins at Topical Torah at the bottom of the hour, 12:30. And so grab yourself a little something to eat or drink. It is the lunch hour, and I will begin with introductions for our guest presenter, Elia Kaplan, who is joining us from Jerusalem. I'll begin with words about her and her work at 12:30. So got another 17 minutes, and we'll be beginning together.
And not 84 anymore.
Hello to all of you who have joined us via our live stream. Our custom at Topical, you're in the right place. This is the Topical Torah program. The program hasn't begun yet because our custom is for us to enjoy lunch with one another from noon until 12:30, and then our program will begin. So we're 13 minutes away from welcoming Elia Kaplan, our guest from Jerusalem. I'll be speaking some introductory words of her at the bottom of the hour. Go and grab yourself a little something to eat or drink before we start. Hello, friends. Those of you who have joined us online, you are in the right place. Please forgive my rather gravelly sound. I've unfortunately returned from my sabbatical not in the greatest of condition. Maybe I was having too much fun. I don't know. In any case, I'm keeping my distance from our in-person attendees today, just to play it absolutely safe. But for those of you who joined us online, I can't infect you. That's the best news. And you can get yourself a little something to eat or drink because our program for Topical Torah begins at the bottom of the hour. We will be joined today by Elia Kaplan from Jerusalem, who does some extraordinary work. I'm looking forward to having a chance to hear from her myself. You will as well. We'll have the opportunity to interact with her too. That begins at 12:30. So we'll be back with you in 7 minutes. All right, Elia, are you able to hear me? Outstanding. Very good. Friends, it is 12:30. First, I want to say to all of you who are here in person, and to those of you who are with us via our live stream, Elia doesn't know this. Well, actually, she does know this. What am I talking about? Our guest does know this. I was gone. You might have missed me. You might not have missed me. I don't know. It was a quick enough little stint of sabbatical. It's the shortest little chunk of sabbatical I've taken in my entire career. It was only 7 weeks in sum, the last week of which was spent in bed sick, which is why I sound a little bit like Lou Rawls this morning. You'll never find. So I've discovered this morning, I told Allison, I said, I got to get to the studio. I have notes that are so low that I don't actually have in my range. So I need to get them recorded so we can fly them in to recordings that I need them in that I can't usually hit. Can't hit anything above right where I'm at, but down below, oh, it's wide open right now. So in any case, yes, yesterday was my first day back after 7 weeks. We will some other time talk about those 7 weeks, the first 6 of which were outstanding until I got sick. And it is great to be back. It's amazing. For those of you who are in the room and I can see your faces, it's just terrific to be back with you. I love and need this time of restoration that we build in for rabbis. That's a part of what happens for rabbis everywhere for very good reason. And it doesn't mean I don't miss you. And when I get back, it's really a great feeling. And so it's just seeing your faces. Big hi. I loved knowing that this program was going to be happening pretty much right after I got back. So it's great to see you all. As regards my illness, for those of you in the room, you'll notice that we've set up the room modestly differently today than we do usually. Usually this table is pretty tight, and I've got people sitting right next to me. Today, you're keeping your distance, and you're wise people for doing that. So we're just going to keep it the way we got it right now. A few brief words of introduction are about to come as regards our program, its content, and our guest. But before I do that, I want to give some special thanks, because usually I collect all these really amazing friends, and every now and then, usually I do the teaching in this program, but usually 2 or 3 times a year we'll bring in some exciting people just for you to hear from some other voices and people who inspire me. Usually I'm the source for those folks. But several months ago, actually it might have even been as much as a year ago, it was a while ago. Yeah, it was a while ago, that Linda Levine, a regular in this program, reached out to me about the work of Elia Kaplan, who is connected to both friends and family in Linda's life. And I was unaware of the specific project that Elia works on that you're going to be hearing about in a little bit. But as you all know, as you'll discover as you hear more about her work, she and I swim in similar ponds. And this is work that I absolutely, from the minute Linda told me about it, wanted to feature here, especially for this group that is hungry for learning specifically about Israel-Palestine, what's going on, what's really happening on the ground, what can we do to be a part of, to be a source, a force for good, especially at a time that I think feels very distressing and disillusioning for all of us. And so at that point, we kind of started, scheming for how we would make this work. And I do want to say, if you do your math, it's 12:33 here. That makes it 10:33 at night, where dear Elia is. And so you haven't even heard a word about her yet, but she's a really nice gal. She's meeting with us at, from 10:45 to midnight her time. So God bless you. They just said, she's young, she'll be okay, she'll recover, it's good. So Linda, anything you'd like to say just in terms of welcoming Elia or telling us a little bit about your connection? I just want to say thank you to you, because today's guest really comes to us from a member of the group, not really from me.
I've been hearing about Alia since she was a freshman at the University of Michigan, which is where my daughter lives, and my daughter is good friends with her mom and dad, and I think they're on the line now. I hope they are, and they can hear me and see me. And I have been fascinated by Karen's discussions with me about what you've been telling her and your family since you've been in Israel. And I was anxious and very happy and proud to have you discuss it with us here today. Thank you, Alia.
So, on last Rosh Hashanah, some of you will probably remember that I told some stories about my visit this past July to the South Hebron Hills in the West Bank. It's a part of the West Bank that has become something of a ground zero in the battle between the Palestinian yearning for self-determination and the Israeli government's aspiration at all costs to foreclose any hope for Palestinian statehood and to annex all the West Bank. It's a region that was very much intended to become a part of a Palestinian state via the Oslo Accords. So we're not talking about a part of the West Bank that was disputed as regards would this ultimately be carved in because of the growth of settlements and whatnot, would it be carved into mainland Israel and other land may be swapped. This was very much land that was always anticipated to be a part of Palestine. It remains home to Palestinian families seeking to live peaceful lives. But with the rising aggression of the extremist Jewish settler movement, empowered by an Israeli government that includes fellow extremists among its most senior ranks, and we've obviously spoken here about the role of Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich and others in the government who are empowering all of what we're going to be learning about today, the outright violations of the human rights of Palestinians are now commonplace in this region of the West Bank. Settlers will show up, for instance, and erect a sign saying that some parcel of Palestinian land is in fact theirs, and the Israeli police force, under Itamar Ben-Gvir's control, he's a Kahanist, serves as the Minister of National Security, he provides them, not the Palestinians, with protection, even in their lawlessness. Settler violence against Palestinians, taunting, harassment, all of this is now rampant in the area, as Israel's extremists now know that the law, such as it is actually on their side. Alarming, but this is the reality of the current government. Now, plenty of English-speaking Jews all around the world who love Israel simply don't know a whole lot about what is going on in places like the South Hebron Hills. It's not, even for those of you who have visited sometimes with me or maybe on your own places in the West Bank, it's not the kind of place that you likely would have gone unless you were intentionally going there, as I did in July, to witness, to come back as a witness to these experiences. So probably not a place any of the rest of you have been. The Israeli government, as we know, treats any criticism as anti-Semitism, especially criticism from outside of Israel is instantly treated as anti-Semitism. This creates an environment where Zionists, like so many of us, who love Israel and who want its peace and its security and who see its coexistence with its Palestinian neighbors as essential to its peace and its security. Those of us who dare to criticize the excesses of this government are quickly dismissed as anti-Zionists, as anti-Semites, even haters of Israel. This should sound familiar, as it is a tactic America's own government is using to deal with dissent in our country. This is where, for blessing, people like our guest today enter the picture. Elia Kaplan co-runs an entity called the Storytelling Project, which is based in Masafer Yatta, right in the heart of the South Hebron Hills, where I saw all of this with my own eyes just this past summer. The Storytelling Project was founded in 2018 by international activists in response to the residents of Masafer Yatta and their need to communicate in English about their experiences under occupation to journalists, to tour groups, to foreign activists. How do you get your story told to people who would not otherwise, for reasons of language barrier, be able to access it? With a foundational knowledge in English and the art of storytelling, which they learn about as well in the program, Palestinian activists are then equipped to represent and advocate for their communities to outside audiences, with the ultimate goal of dismantling the oppressive and life-threatening reality of Israel's occupation. In preparation for today, Elia described for me a little bit about what her days working for the project look like. And she acknowledges, and we'll surely hear about this from her in just a few moments, she acknowledges that her days are profoundly impacted by the larger political context and what the local situation looks like at any given time. So sometimes the military presence or settler violence or the rigidity of the travel checkpoints will intervene to prevent her from doing all of the work that she seeks to do. But to the extent that's possible, she drives to Masafer Yatta in the South Hebron Hills from Jerusalem 2 days per week. She lives in Jerusalem, gets through all of the nonsense that it takes to get to the South Hebron Hills, does this twice per week to teach English language, to teach storytelling classes. So not only giving you storytelling classes, so not just facility with language, but also how do you tell this story such that it will land in people's minds and hearts, influence them, change them, the way stories are designed to do. She is currently teaching 3 separate classes to students from various villages in the region, and she assists in the facilitation of relationships between many of them, and even with other residents of the area who are not her students. She also works to help them foster relationships with news outlets who can publish and share their stories with broader audiences. So her goal is what we might consider sort of the very top of the Maimonidean ladder of tzedakah, right? The best type of help that you can provide to somebody is to enable them to help themselves. And so Elia's goal is to help Palestinian activists help themselves, to enable them to strengthen their English and their storytelling skills, excuse me, in order to become their own advocates and their own spokespeople. So this is visionary work. It is increasingly dangerous work, heroic work. But we are so blessed that people like Elia enable Palestinians to see this as the true face of the Jewish people. There's so much going on right now in the state of Israel that, as fellow Jews around the world, makes us ashamed. It's important for us to hear stories, talk about Storytelling Project, for us to hear stories of the storytellers and those who are teaching the storytellers and who are influencing lives. Think about the Palestinians who meet people like Elia, and they discover this is an Israeli, this is a Jew. The impact of that by itself, so important as a counterbalance against all of the other painful narratives about what the Jewish people perhaps stand for in the eyes of our Palestinian neighbors. How blessed we are to learn from her experiences firsthand today at 10:43 in the evening. And so with no further ado, I just want to express my great thanks in welcoming Elia Kaplan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction, so generous. And I feel so welcome also in this space. This is despite being so far away and with a crazy time difference and several screens, I really feel like I can imagine the energy in the space, and I feel really quite welcome. So thank you for that. I'm going to speak a little bit about myself, about the work that I do, about how I got here, and tell you a few stories of the people who I work with and interact with on a daily basis when I'm in Masafer Yatta. So, as both Linda and Rabbi Chazen said, my name is Elia Kaplan. I am originally from Israel, Palestine. I was born in the borders of, we call it 48 when we're here, Israel proper. And I grew up with an Israeli father and an American mother. I spent the first 9 years of my life in this land before we moved to Philadelphia, where I spent the rest of my young adulthood, and I went to college at the University of Michigan, as was mentioned. And I found my way back here a number of times over the years in my quest to kind of understand my relationship to this place and to my Jewish identity and my Israeli identity. I spent many years grappling with that, not fully understanding where I stood, desperately wanting to relate to my Israeli family and my Israeli peers. And so when I graduated high school, I came back here for a mechina year, which many young Jewish Israelis participate in as a military preparatory program that is government funded to help young Israelis prepare themselves mentally, physically, and emotionally for whatever it is that they go on to do in the army. So I went on this program and was thrilled to be back in as a fledgling adult and figuring out what it feels like to live here. And I connected deeply with my friends during that year, and I considered enlisting because I was surrounded by this group of people who were so energized and also motivated by their surroundings and environment to join the military and do the most to give back to their country, which is how everybody is raised to see it. There are a fair few who refuse, and I'm sure you've seen there have been a number of young adults who have refused ever since October 7th in the name of standing against what's going on in Gaza. But that is not the mainstream whatsoever. And also I felt that this was a helpful way for me to prove to myself and to anyone that I was Israeli. That if I were to join the military, no one would question it. In the end, I went back to college. I started a long and uncomfortable process of unlearning a lot of the things that I grew up with. I came here one summer between my junior and senior years to do some protective presence, to accompany Palestinian shepherds to their lands, to graze their flocks. And by my presence with other activists, we hoped to mitigate some of the potential violence that settlers and primarily settlers at the time, this was pre-October 7th, might enact against them. And this was this was my introduction to the activist ecosystem here. Anyway, that's my background. I came here the last time in June of 2023 to study Arabic and to see what my next steps were, because I had graduated college and for the first time I was set out upon the world to figure out my way and to figure out what I wanted to be doing. And I found my way to a program called Achvat Amim, Solidarity of Nations, which encourages young international Jews to come and learn about what's going on in the land. And also, this is a multi-generational program. I had a participant recently who was 72 years old come and learn about everything that's going on here as best as can be delivered in a 4-month program, lectures and tours, etc. So I found my way back here during that program and started volunteering with the Storytelling Project as one of my volunteering placements. I eventually took over as one of the co-directors. Now I run it with my friend, and we have an Achvat participant of our own. So it's a very, very small project. And as you heard, it's a very complex one. We have a lot of different goals, primarily to stand in solidarity with the communities in Masaferiata as they express the needs that they express, the desires they have, how they want to best represent themselves and advocate for themselves. And that looks like English language classes and storytelling classes, media literacy, which is a great tool to help people represent themselves on social media or to facilitate the relationships between them and news outlets like The Guardian or 972, which is a local publication that is one of the more liberal and progressive, to say the least, publications that publishes voices from within Israel, from the West Bank, from Gaza, Jewish Israeli voices, Palestinian voices, international voices, all speaking about what's going on in Israel-Palestine. So that is more or less what the Storytelling Project is. And through it, I have been I've been exposed to and have interacted with incredible people, incredible communities. And I would love to share that with you, to speak a little bit about who I meet and what life looks like in Masafariata, the effects of the occupation on the lives of the people that I work closely with. So my daily life, as the rabbi said, is very affected by the occupation. When I go, I leave Jerusalem, I drive my car with yellow plates, and I cross a checkpoint. I fly through it. No one stops me, no one looks twice. And I just today got a text from a friend, a Palestinian friend of mine who lives in Beit Jala in Bethlehem, who was on his way to his family's home in Seir, which is on the way, on my drive to Masafariata. And it took him 3 hours. And that is a significantly shorter drive than the one I do on the same route. And he was stopped and derailed from his visit to his family for 3 hours. So this happens every day. This happens multiple times during my visits to the South. And our lives look incredibly different. I can leave at the end of the day, whereas my Palestinian friends and partners cannot. Anyway, so I shall continue and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the stories. There are countless stories, there are countless families and people who I work with, but there's one family in particular who I feel their experience encapsulate very coherently and comprehensively some of what I see in Masafariata. And hearing about them might give you more of a picture of what many people experience. I'll start by describing who they are. So Shug and Zachariah, they are a couple. Zachariah is 29, I believe. Shug is my age, he's 25. They have 4 children. The eldest is in 1st grade. She's brilliant. They're all brilliant, but she's getting like all full marks in her classes. She's just very sweet. This is fresh in my mind because she just got a great grade on her test. And the youngest are twins who are 1 year and 7 months. This couple, Shug is one of my students in one of my courses. She is brilliant and funny and curious and has just the most resilient outlook on life. And I'll tell you a little bit about what she's had to face this past year. I assume that some of you may have heard of the movie No Other Land, the documentary that won the Oscar recently. It's an astounding film. I highly, highly recommend watching it if you get the opportunity. And this is occurring, for some context, this happens exactly in the communities that I work in. Basil and Yuval, I've met them both. Hamdan, who is one of the other co-directors, is a close friend. We worked closely together to bring to light some of the stories that he wanted to publish. There was also recently an attack in Susia a few Mondays ago in which he was very brutally injured and arrested. So anyway, for some context, this is where I go, and these are the people that I see. And the last scene in the film is a clip that somebody filmed of a young man being shot. This is the closing scene, and it's the final footage from October 13th, 2023. That man is Zachariah. And he, Baruch Hashem, is alive and well. He had, I think, 14 surgeries. There were very, very severe repercussions to this injury. He was shot in the stomach. He lost significant portions of his internal organs. He could not eat for a long time. He could not walk for a long time. When I met him, he was unable to pick anything up. And now he's walking without a cane. He can pick up his children. He is on the mend, and he is unbelievably resilient. And for over the course of the last several months, both he and Shug, his wife, have spoken with visiting groups about this reality that they are experiencing and living. And the settler who came and shot Zechariah point blank with an illegal dum-dum bullet, which explodes upon impact, so it exploded within his stomach, doing as much damage as possible. This settler, nothing has happened to him. Many people filed complaints against the settler and opened a case file, including Zechariah. Once he was well enough, he went to the police station in Kiryat Arba, which is where Itamar Ben-Gvir lives. Important to note. And while he was there, he was arrested for who knows what. He and I think some folks who went with him. And they had to call their lawyer and they had to pay a fine to be released from the police station, where they went to file a complaint against the man who shot him in the stomach. Shog was caring for Zechariah and for their 4 children consistently on her own for these months. There are other family members in the picture who were very helpful, but Shog was the primary caretaker for all of them. The twins were 4 months old when Zechariah was shot, and it was a very familiar sight to see her juggling the 2 twins on each hand and rushing from place to place, bringing Zechariah food or first aid to help clean his wounds. And she did all of this with a smile, and I'm astounded to this day by her humor and by her optimism, and by her down to earth and honest understanding of the reality. There is no naivety here. She's not she's just somehow this positive. She also is from a little village called Jawaya nearby, and she has never seen the sea. She lives in a little village called Tawani. She's been to Yatta, which is a city 15 minutes away. She's been to Hebron, which is about 25 minutes away, and she has never been to the sea. She talks about it all the time. She talks about wanting to get a permit to come to Jerusalem to pray or to go to Haifa. And this is just a common reality of so many people in the West Bank who are unable to get permits despite their attempts. Permits are denied regularly in droves, which is often why people go their whole life without seeing a site a few kilometers away. One of the organizations that I did some work with that summer that I was here during my college years is called Min al Bahar, means from the sea. And it is an organization primarily of retired women who for many years spent their time fighting for permits for groups of women and children from the West Bank in order to help them come to the beach, to come swim or spend some time at the sea. And this was just a small way that I think some of the Jewish Israeli women who were running this organization felt they could contribute to the lives of women and children who otherwise wouldn't be able to reach the ocean, to reach the sea. So this is a little bit about Shogun Zechariah's life. And if you want to read more about her, about how she talks about her story, she wrote an article. We workshopped it, and she told her story, and it's published on 972. They have a website, they have social media, they're easy to find, and it's a fantastic representation of her own story and her voice. I highly recommend looking that up. These stories are not accessible unless you know where to look. Like I think if I asked an average Israeli on the street if they knew anything about the South Hebron Hills or Masafer Yatta, they would look at me funny because they'd never heard the name. They wouldn't know the stories of someone like Shog or someone like Zechariah. They wouldn't know the stories that the rabbi knows from having visited the South Hebron Hills this past summer, because it is deeply inaccessible and intentionally so. recently there has been some media coverage of what's going on in the West Bank, specifically of the attack on Susia 2 weeks ago, in Haaretz, which is the only Israeli publication besides 972, which is a much smaller scale, the only Israeli publication that's saying anything about this, and that still is quite limited. And the Israeli government has a campaign against Haaretz. And just like how when they closed the Al Jazeera offices in Jerusalem a few months back, now they're fighting against Haaretz. This is a blatant attempt to silence any dissenting voices, both in the media specifically and in general. There is also a current legislation that passed its first reading in the Knesset and is probably going to return sometime in May when the Knesset returns from their hiatus, meant to tax human rights organizations and NGOs 80% if they get more than half of their funding from international entities. And that is the majority of NGOs and human rights organizations, because their own government, the Israeli government, will not fund their work because it exposes the human rights violations and the injustices of the Israeli occupation, and of the system of oppression that is placed over Palestinians in the occupied territories. So all of these are examples of how the Israeli government is working to very deliberately craft the narrative of the Israeli state that they want to represent. This is something that might be familiar to you with the term hasbara. It is a very successful narrative. The Israeli state has spent its whole existence, and also before its establishment, creating a narrative to tell its own people and the international communities of what Israel stands for, and that it is a haven for the Jewish people after the Holocaust, that it is a light unto the nations, the only democracy in the Middle East, the most moral army. All of these phrases are part of the narrative that is built and that is taught both in schools, that is shared in the media, that is presented by the army and in academia and all of the institutions across the state. And it's very convenient and it's beautiful and it is an ideal. And that is not the reality. There are beautiful things about this place. There truly are. There are incredible people and well-meaning people and organizations that are doing incredible work, and it has been a haven for a lot of people. And that is not mutually exclusive from also the oppression of an entire neighboring people in the name of our own safety, which it simply is not. There are so many documentaries and books and articles to read about this. The most recent one that I've engaged with is called The Law in These Parts. It's a documentary where people who were responsible for writing and upholding Israeli laws in the occupied territories speak about it. From the very beginning of the occupation, in 1967, there were plans for the occupation before 1967. It is clear from these rules, from the men who talk about their position and their responsibility, that this was always the plan, or this was always a possibility. This was potential. I've gotten a little derailed, but the fact of how the state structures the narrative is very intentional, and it's meant to keep people in the dark about this. So the fact that this film, That No Other Land, reached the Oscars, the fact that I can talk to you now and share what I've seen or share what I witness, is an incredible thing, because it's going against the Israeli state's fight to quell dissenting voices, and it's so important to fight for the freedom of information, for the freedom of speech, all of the things that I think also are incredibly relevant in the United States right now. Watching the way that these two countries are helping each other and are supporting each other in similar and very scary initiatives and policies is incredibly frightening. And it's very strange to be on this side of the world, looking back at where I've spent most of my life, and see so many parallels. So yeah, what I see is vital context, I think, for understanding what flies under the radar, even for people living here, especially for people living here, even because I think so much of this information is more accessible to people internationally right now, including what's happening in Gaza. Your average Israeli will not know what's going on in Gaza besides trying to get the hostages back, which even that is not really what the state is fighting for at all. The human stories of what's happening in Gaza and in the West Bank are not accessible. So I'm so honored to be able to share some of these stories with you, because my work is deeply human and it's interpersonal and it's close-knit, and I'm so grateful for how it taught me what really is truly happening, that I also, despite being on the path to this kind of activism for many years, I didn't know anything about it until I stepped foot in Masafariata myself and really met people and heard their stories from their own mouths and witnessed it for myself. It's hard to believe. Everything that activists like me say, everything that is shown in No Other Land, it's hard to believe because it goes against everything that we've been taught. Everything that the state says it stands for. And it is an immense amount of cognitive dissonance that we have to combat. And it's deeply uncomfortable. So I commend you all. I really, truly, like, this is I'm so moved by anyone who wants to be having these conversations, especially right now. I find it incredibly powerful. And I'm honored to be here and speaking with you, to share some of the stories that move me, the realities that I witness and the people that I meet, and the work itself that is so valuable because it's personal and because it exists within a solidarity ecosystem with other organizations of activists, both international and local, who all work in this network of solidarity. And it's also, briefly, I'll mention that I've also recently, and this, I'll close with this, that I am beginning, a few months ago, I started working with another NGO called OFEC, the Israeli Center for Public Affairs, which does a lot more political work, international advocacy, and is working also to combat this new taxation legislation against NGOs that I mentioned. So kind of tying that back in. But it has been very important to me and nuanced to be working also in a very interpersonal, small scale of single communities and of families and of students here and there, and hearing their personal stories and teaching people face to face, like, which feels so intimate and close, and also work in the field. And on the other hand, doing a much more administrative job on my computer in Jerusalem that is working on a more macro level. And so working in these two organizations has allowed me to really get a sense of the significance of macro and micro level work. And I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to do both, because I think both are so valuable, and we need people doing everything. We need people doing the micro work, we need people doing the macro work, we need people in the States and in other diaspora communities to be thinking and talking and sharing about this. So anyway, that is my spiel. I'm really so grateful for you, your invitation.
Wow, Elia, I'd like to kind of begin our conversation maybe with offering a few questions of my own, and then we'll open it up for everybody else to offer questions as well. First, I want to seize upon that you talked for a moment about your own journey with regard to IDF service, friends, the narrative one grows up with, and then the difference of what one actually confronts. I'm curious about if you have friends, family members who do serve, who went into the IDF with the purity of arms and the mission of protecting Israel, and all of which is an important part of what the IDF in fact does. And then there's this other part of what the IDF does, and folks land in places like Masafer Yatta and in Susia, and where I was also, actually I was barred from going to Susia this summer. We tried to, and we were detained for a long period of time and given the runaround, and ultimately, I think I described on Rosh Hashanah that it became very, very clear that we were the problem that the Israeli police and the IDF was protecting the settlers from. Once it became clear to them that we were there to create problems with what was going on with the settlers, that's when the trucks of soldiers with their weapons drawn rolled in, and we got the message. For friends, family members who suddenly find themselves serving in such places, I would love to hear, no one grows up dreaming of oppressing Palestinians. So do you hear stories of folks who are dealing with that moral struggle, are feeling dutiful to their country? I mean, we all know that military service includes all kinds of moral challenges. I mean, they're, by definition, you're just constantly confronting challenges that civilians don't confront. I'm just wondering if you've heard stories, had a chance to talk with folks who are wrestling with this.
That's an excellent question. I have heard stories. My partner's younger brother is 18. He just enlisted this past year, and he was stationed. Well, he received the position of being a it's called, I think the translation will be something like a hasbara teacher of sorts, like a guide for visiting military groups or others who come to learn about the state, also within the state primarily. It's really for other soldiers and for groups like Mechina students. And he was stationed in the West Bank, which they called Judea and Samaria in the military, which also tells you a lot about the nuance there. And he was thrilled to be learning about the state, about the history, about the politics, and until he got this position in the West Bank, because he grew up in a liberal Zionist family in a very left-wing space and environment. He was aware of the occupation, which is not a given, not only aware but opposed, and he felt incredibly conflicted about being stationed there. However, he then felt, okay, well, maybe I am the right person to be there, because perhaps I can teach people also some of the hard truths, or share some of the realities that I, as somebody who is politically opposed to the occupation, I can share this in a way that maybe a more radical right-wing, or even just neutral, apolitical soldier who doesn't think so much about it might be able to do. But eventually he realized, because he went with an open mind. He said, okay, maybe this will be fine. Maybe I could be a change from within. And he spent, I think, a week in this role in the West Bank, and he physically couldn't do it, because the dissonance of what the military was asking him to say and what he knew to be true and what he felt was too great. And he's an outlier. I think most people would not have reacted that way. I think plenty of people either complete their army service before they have any questions about their experiences, or never have any questions about their experiences. It's important to note that the storytelling project is under the umbrella of Breaking the Silence. which is one of the one on the larger side of the Israeli NGOs who are working to share the reality on the ground.
Just real quickly,
Please.
I want to jump in just to make sure everybody understands Breaking the Silence is the organization of soldiers who have experienced things that they did not expect that was what service was going to be, and they've chosen to take the great chance with their personal futures in speaking out about that. So storytelling also from, in fact, Breaking the Silence is in many ways the answer to the question that I asked Ellie. I didn't know that you guys were formally associated with Breaking the Silence.
Well, yeah, so the storytelling began independently in 2018 and eventually, and actually was working first with 972, but management, I think, changed, and sometime in the past few years, Breaking the Silence became our umbrella organization. And so we work with them. We also help facilitate some of our students to be speakers on tours that Breaking the Silence leads in Hebron, in the South Hebron Hills. And so what the woman who is in charge of our relationship is also somebody who served in Hebron, and she grew up in a settlement in a religious family. She went to serve as exactly actually what my partner's younger brother's position was. She would share these stories, and she loved Hebron, and she loved the Jewish history there, and she would share this with groups and form connections also with the local settler community. And it took a very long time for her to think about it any differently, because it's you're not confronted with it in mainstream society. And so the people who give their testimonies, who break their silence, are the minority, and they also, as you mentioned, can face grave consequences socially and also professionally. It's a big risk to take to share your story. And the man who founded Breaking the Silence, Yehuda Shaul, was serving in Hebron during the Second Intifada as a commander, and was seeing things and asked to do things that he was shocked by. And so he invited his soldiers to his living room to start talking about what was going on, and that was the beginning of the organization. And not long ago, I think in 2020, he and another previous executive director of Breaking the Silence parted ways with Breaking the Silence to found OFIC, which is this other organization that I work with. And so they're closely knit, they're on great terms. They just do slightly different work.
Yeah, I raised that question not to impugn, because if anybody. I have not served in the military, and I don't know if there are some of you in the room. Yes, I know Alan has. We've had these conversations here many, many times about service in the military here and in Israel, and goes without saying, the Israeli military is a necessity, and at the same time, it only makes, when you think of the heroic things, the things that make you proudest about the work of Israeli military intelligence, the military itself, all of those accomplishments only make it harder when you see the thing, because to challenge it, to speak out against the military, is to cast aspersions on the entire enterprise and the massive weight against doing that. And also, who are the people who are experiencing this for the first time? They're 18, 19, 20 years old. And they're thinking about their entire lives, their future, every relationship they have. It takes unbelievable courage for somebody this age in that experience, and vision, frankly, to be able to actually see what's there before your eyes. I thought that was, in many ways, the most compelling part of what you just described. Can you even see it? It's a very, very complicated mix. I want to ask you, because conflicts always have two parties in them, and by definition, it's not as though Palestinian leadership has heroically and bravely and wisely led its own people in such a way that would bring world opprobrium over the refusal to grant rights of self-determination to the Palestinian people. from someone who does what you do and is much, much more connected to the Palestinian people, just in terms of relationally, than most Israeli citizens get to be nowadays. Before the intifadas, it was actually very common for Israeli citizens to go to their favorite restaurant or bar in Jericho or hang out with people down the road in Hebron or whatever it is. So the two peoples knew each other much more. Well, intifadas, walls go up, people don't really know each other anymore. And of course, we all know that when you separate entire segments of people out of your life, it just leads to both sides naturally reaching all kinds of negative assumptions about the other, racisms in both directions. That's what comes with that kind of thing. I'm curious, for someone with your eyes, who wears your glasses, literally and figuratively, what do you see as the Palestinian part in this conflict? And do you have a hope for, based on the people who you meet, on how they might transcend their part in this? We're busy focusing with good cause on our part, but I'm curious about your vision of the other, because you're just a lot closer to it than the rest of us.
This is a really complicated question, and I want to preface it by saying that I really can't speak to the Palestinian voice or narrative around this. I suppose, I have spoken with a fair number of people across generations, with different social identities who have very different perspectives on this. And not everybody, hardly anyone agrees. Which is not a surprise, and also is something I think we're all familiar with on our own end. The Palestinian Authority is a very contentious body. People are incredibly frustrated by them. The kind of life that they lead in cities and in more rural areas like Masafariata, are deeply affected by the PA's decisions and some of the mismanagement, to say the least. This is the most superfluous example and anecdote, but the clocks in the West Bank changed 2 hours after the clocks in Israel, because the PA decided. Maybe there's more reason to it, but I asked plenty of people, because I realized this when I was starving, because I thought it was 7 p.m. and everyone thought it was 6 p.m. Anyway, so that is like the most minute kind of irrelevant anecdote, but there are so many things that the PA decides to do that affect the Palestinian people. For example, since October 7th, the financial situation has been incredibly dire, both because no permits have been given to Palestinians who want to work within 48, to do construction work or to do agricultural labor. So many jobs that the Israeli economy and infrastructure depend on. And so there have been so much work has been stalled in 48, and people were complaining about it because they're like, please, can we have the Palestinian workers back? We have no construction happening. Anyway, so many of the Palestinian workers who were working in Israel have had no income. This also actually goes back to Zachariah's story, because after he was shot, he couldn't work in 48. Not that there were permits, but their income was totally gone, and the rest of the family faced repercussions as well, because his family members who did have permits had those permits revoked because the state feared that they would take revenge for Zachariah being shot. So Zachariah was shot by a settler, lost his permit, his family members lost their permits, because lest they should act in retribution. Anyway, to come back to your question, I recently spoke with a man named Sam Bahour, who is a Palestinian-American businessman and entrepreneur. He founded Paltech, or I think that's what it's called, Paltel maybe, the Palestinian technological cell phone company, and is a big name in Palestinian technology. He spent most of his life, he grew up in the States, I think in Ohio somewhere, and moved to Palestine after he married a young Palestinian woman with her. They have 2 daughters. And he spoke with a group of us about his perspective on the Palestinian narrative, and shared that one of his daughters, I think she's at MIT or Harvard, one of each of his daughters is at both of those institutions, and they had very, very different opinions. He believed that the Palestinian people should be fighting within the systems that exist, and his daughter did not. And they recorded a podcast episode with Peter Beinart. So if you want to hear their voices and their opposing perspectives, you can look up this podcast episode. But his daughter said something really fascinating, which is that she kind of felt like everything, if the state was already going to annex all of the West Bank, and if they were going to go ahead and annex Palestine, they might as well annex. And then it will become a civil rights struggle. Because once Palestine is annexed into Israel, necessarily Palestinians would need to be either citizens, or if they're not citizens, then it is an apartheid struggle. And so in her mind...
Yeah, forgive me for jumping in real quickly, but like this is obviously the thing that keeps me awake at night, right? I don't think anybody there is in the government is thinking about this, but once they actually succeed in their wildest dreams of annexing the West Bank, then suddenly all those people they decide not to count in the math of who does Israel control suddenly are on the docket. And then, anybody who's been able to, or has chosen for reasons of principle to say, I can just differentiate between what's happening in Israel, bad as it may be, and apartheid, becomes real difficult to do that once the West Bank is officially a part of Israel. So please go on. I'm sorry.
That's exactly it. I think is there a lesser of two evils? I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone is. And so this happening within one family only goes to show just how distinctive and just how maybe contradictory some of the opinions are within the Palestinian population. I think another brief example is this friend of mine who I mentioned who was delayed in his journey to his family in Seir. He's 23, I think, and he's very opposed to the PA. He lives in Bethlehem. He's a young city guy, studying at the University of Birzeit. Actually, he was studying in the States and then was not permitted to return to his studies in the States and was forced to transfer back to Birzeit. His father is a close friend of my parents, and his father used to work closely with the PA. And there's a very stark difference of opinion politically in the household. But conversations are constant. The sons listen with very respectful attention to their father and argue back. And so I think my answer is that I don't have one. My answer is that I think the population is incredibly divided. I also would not say that the PA is our hope for any kind of resolution. I think there needs to be I think a lot of things. I'm not a political analyst and I don't have so much experience in saying this, but I think that there needs to be a change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel badly if I made you feel like you're like on the spot to be a political analyst.
No.
But it's such an opportunity given the actual deep relationships of the story that you just told. Didn't every one of us hear the generational struggles within our own families right there, right? We'll work within the system, blow the whole thing up, the young folks, right? This is something we're hearing and we're wrestling with within our own families, and I would imagine are happening with Israeli families as well. And that actually kind of leads me to I promise you my last question, the rest is going to be all these guys. And that is, what keeps you loyal to Israel and what keeps you hopeful for Israel? I'm going to say it again just because there are some in the room who didn't hear me. What keeps you loyal to Israel and what keeps you hopeful for Israel?
That's a great question. Before I answer it, I realized that I've mistaken that. Back to the previous anecdote, this father was not part of the PA, he was part of the PLO, very different. But Um, that's, I think, first of all, loyalty is an interesting word. Um, Especially as somebody who grew up both in Israel and in the States, someone with dual identities, dual nationalities. I speak English, Hebrew, and Arabic. I'm pulled in a lot of different directions, and so I think I don't think I would choose the word loyal, but I would say that my commitment to this cause and my commitment to being a Jewish Israeli and an American working towards this, working towards equal rights for everybody, self-determination for everybody, dignity for everybody, is that that feels like one of the greatest and most fundamental Jewish beliefs and tenets. I think one of the greatest lies that is told is that the Israeli state is doing all of this in the name of the Jews, and in the name of Judaism, because it goes against so much of what Judaism stands for. And so much of also what's going on in the States with JVP and If Not Now and other organizations and movements that are saying not in our name is exactly that. That if this is in the name of the Jews, then that is inherently contradictory.
Although that's kind of where the nexus of my question comes from, because they're saying there shouldn't be an Israel, and you are an Israeli citizen working, going home to Jerusalem every day, and then getting in the car and going out there and working with these Palestinian families. And so loyal might be the wrong, I agree with you. That's not a fair question. What keeps you, I don't know, I think you get what the question is. I don't have the right word for it.
Yes.
What keeps you Israeli and committed to the idea of an Israeli Jewish state and also rights of self-determination for Palestinians?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that as the people who are responsible for so much of the oppression of our neighbors, it is inherently our responsibility to take responsibility and to use our own privileges as Jews, as Israelis, to say that this is wrong, and to say, no, this state should be better than this, and to say, yes, our forefathers came here however many years ago, before the establishment of the state, after the establishment of the state, there was no reason to do so much of what has been done in the name of this. Like, we could have lived in a peaceful way. So there are so many caveats to that, obviously, back and forth with both parties, etc. But my point is that as Israelis, I'm incredibly proud to be doing this as an Israeli person. I do decide, I pick and choose kind of when I share that identity with different audiences, different Palestinians. Most of the people I work with know, because I feel close enough with them. They trust me, they understand. There's enough of a Jewish Israeli presence also in these spaces of activists that people understand that not all Jewish Israelis are fighting for their demise or trying to oppress them. But I believe that the state can be moral, and the state must be moral. And if there is going to be any kind of future of an Israeli state in this land, we have to do it with the Palestinians, not against them, and not have them be the step up, not erase them in the name of actualizing a dream that that goes against also our own histories. Like, as so many people, as Eastern European Jews and Ashkenazi Jews in general, so many people experience my grandparents experienced the Holocaust, for example. Coming to a place and displacing other people and doing things that our own people experienced not very long ago feels hard to imagine, even though it's just right in front of us, because it feels like we should know better and we should be better because we experienced it ourselves. Intergenerationally, we have inherited this. This is something that the Israeli state teaches every generation by bringing Israeli high schoolers to Auschwitz, to various concentration camps, to educate the next generation on the plight, on the horrors that the Jewish people experienced, and uses that to justify the occupation, as opposed to saying, let's not do this also. So I think this was kind of a roundabout. Maybe I didn't answer your question at all, but that's what I got for you.
What you got for me, I won't speak for all these nice people, but I'll speak for myself. You inspire the hell out of me. I'm really, really grateful to have the opportunity to meet you today, and I want to give these guys an opportunity to ask whatever questions they want to. Alan, you've got a microphone in front of you. Please turn it on and speak directly into it so that Elia can hear you.
Hi, Elia. My name's Alan Goldman. I have a sort of personal question for you. What kind of harassment, if any, have you received from either side, the Israelis or the Palestinians, during all of your time in these positions?
It's a very real question, very important one. I regularly interact with settlers as well as Israeli military and police. The settlers are the most aggressive, often, not always. And so many of them are teenagers. They're incredibly young. They've been raised into this. They've been brought up in this politic and introduced to it by their parents. Their parents sometimes send them to wreak havoc because they know that no one's going to harm a child. So the young settlers and also the older ones, I thank goodness have not experienced any kind of true violence. I've been pushed around a little bit, but nothing serious. A very close friend of mine in this attack on Susia a few weeks back was really beaten by settlers just for being present. So that is a threat always. There is also the soldiers who come, some of whom whose conduct is really quite polite, others of whom are incredibly patronizing, primarily to Palestinians. They speak down to them in a way that I wouldn't wish anyone to be spoken to. And they also, many of them hate us. They think we are on the wrong side. I've been called a traitor more times than I can count. They're shocked. They're not so shocked to see internationals. They are appalled to see Jewish Israelis, to be spoken to in Hebrew by an activist. When it felt relevant, in order to bring the soldiers' attention to me as opposed to the Palestinian next to me, I engaged with them, which I try not to do because it doesn't lead anywhere. But there was a moment where I was speaking to a number of soldiers who were settler soldiers, which is happening more and more often now, that when some soldiers decide not to serve in the West Bank or in general, like people from the settlements enlist and then serve in their own region. And so they know the Palestinians by name because they grew up harassing them right next door. And so, for example, a friend of mine named Ali, who lives in a village called Tuba, he interacts with a settler soldier on a daily basis who he grew up being harassed by, and who calls Ali by name. You know, Ali will be driving his car and this guy will pull up and stop him and give him a ticket. But this is the same guy who just whatever, in another lifetime, they could have just been two neighbors. Anyway, so those are some forms of that harassment that I face from the Jewish-Israeli side. I also, within Jewish-Israeli society, I went to a protest after the ceasefire was broken. And I sat in a square calling for an end to the war with some friends, and the police came and beat us up. When what we were calling for was an end to death anywhere. And a return of the hostages and the safety of these people in Gaza and the safety of Jewish Israeli people here, and an end to a 16-month-long war. And they came and they beat us up. So there's a ton of that also within mainstream Jewish Israeli society. People were walking by, regular Israelis, average Israelis, spitting on us, calling us traitors. Again, that's a big buzzword these days. And I have to say that I've been really lucky. I feel very safe when I go to work. I don't stop along the way, except for at a little supermarket called Abu Shanab. I know everybody there. They know me. They helped me fix my car a few weeks ago. It was actually hilarious. We pulled over, and men of all generations came and stood and looked at my car like this and had very many opinions about what I should be doing with it when the engine overheats. This is universal, I think. And I think, and also it's important to note that I don't go anywhere where the community doesn't know activists. I go to villages and communities that have had long-standing relationships with activists, or at the very least know somebody. I will never go alone. I will never introduce myself as Israeli first thing. It is a sensitive place, and my personal experiences have been only positive with Palestinians because of the circumstances of my job, because I go where I know I'll be okay. The other day, and I think my parents were very concerned about this decision-making process of mine, when I had car problems, I was stuck in Masafariata. It was during Ramadan. It was this past month. And I needed to get the car back. I personally felt like I must drive the car back that night. I need to get it back to Jerusalem, when really I could have left it there and found a ride back and come back later in the week and come to get it. But it felt deeply important to me to take the car. And so the solution was to call my mechanic who works in East Jerusalem. And he sent four mechanics who he knew from Hebron, which is 25 minutes away, to collect my car and me and my coworker and take us to their garage in Hebron. And in the moment, I was like, great, let's go. I was excited to be figuring out the car situation. And in reality, as a 25-year-old woman anywhere, not necessarily just in Palestine, it was questionable decision-making, probably. But I went in the car with these four young Palestinian guys, four Palestinian mechanics. One of them drove my car, which was shocking to me because I thought it was kaput. And they put us up in their office, in the office above them shop. They brought us knafe. They brought us coffee. They sat and chatted with us. They were so confused what two white international girls were doing in Masafariata. They, who live 25 minutes away, had never been to Masafariata.
Confused that you said yes and got in the car.
So, and I don't know. I generally want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I want to believe that people are inherently good. I am beginning to be somewhat disillusioned by that. But I am more disillusioned by that in the average mainstream Israeli society than I am in what I've experienced in Palestine. And it's a limited slice of life that I have in Palestine. That's important to note. There are plenty of people who would want nothing to do with me, if not worse. But my communities that I work with have never harassed me.
Go ahead, Shelley. Make sure that microphone's on. It's on the side. Shell? Yeah, there's a little button there.
Hello?
Yep,
I
you're
did
good.
it, okay. Hi, my name is Shelley Steyer, and I have two statements and I have two questions. First of all, I think I speak for everybody
Wait,
here.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Again, my name is Shelley Steyer, and think I'm speaking for everybody here who greatly admire your bravery and your focus on something that is really a difficult situation. Secondly, we might have a connection because last week my granddaughter went to the University of Michigan to find out about being admitted. So we'll keep you informed. All right. First question. How are the Palestinians on the West Bank able to reconcile the devastation of fellow Palestinians in Gaza?
Wow, really good question. Also, I'd like to say that I'm delighted by everyone's introduction of themselves. I'm very happy to get to know you virtually, and I hope your granddaughter is enjoying Michigan. That's a wonderful question. A really, really devastating one. I think because of what happened in 1948, and because of 1967, of every moment in which Palestinians were displaced from their land, so many people in the West Bank and in Israel have family in Gaza. People who live in Yafo, in the south of Tel Aviv, are mere kilometers away from Gaza. It is almost happenstance that they were not in Gaza themselves. The way that people's families were split over the years makes it such that many, many people in the West Bank, many people in 48, have family members who are experiencing what's happening in Gaza and are at a loss because they can't do anything. And they have an incredibly different lived experience. Like you said, it's nearly impossible to reconcile. Every part of Palestinian society has very different rights one from the other. Also by chance, by circumstance, by where the border was drawn. Palestinian citizens of Israel have significantly more rights than Palestinians in East Jerusalem who are not citizens. They cannot vote, who have more rights than Palestinians in the West Bank, who need a permit to cross a wall and a checkpoint, who have more rights and benefits and opportunities than Palestinians in Gaza. So every single group has a deeply different experience, and some Palestinian citizens of Israel who I've spoken to about this are horrified, but maybe feel more distant from it and are looking at it as a horrifying event, but not necessarily as these are our brethren. And then there are others. I have a friend, one of the women who I work closely with in Masafiriyata, her name is Hanadi. She lives in a village called Khair, a Bedouin village, where the settlement of Carmel was situated right on top of them in the attempt to ethnically cleanse them as well, and in various ways it's working. But Hanadi, every time I see her, talks about what's happening in Gaza. And that how could you possibly celebrate Eid at the end of Ramadan when people in Gaza are dying and being starved and dying of thirst and disease? How can you live your life? And this is coming from a woman who, while she has running water, has so few resources, so few opportunities. She is also, it's astounding really how many people are my age. She's also 25, and has 3 sons, and doesn't leave her village. She went to give birth in Hebron. That's as far as she went. And she, as somebody who I think most of us, all of us, would look at and say, wow, her life is hard. Her life is limited. And she says it herself. She also wrote a beautiful piece in a magazine called Vashti. It's a British Jewish magazine. Highly recommend also looking at that. It's called The Floating House. It's a prose piece about the home that she grew up in, receiving a demolition order. And at the time of this publication, it didn't, but it has since been demolished. But she talks a lot about the limitations of her life, about what she can't do, what she will never be able to do. And yet, looking at what's going on in Gaza is a horror to her, just as it is to us, if not more, because she's Palestinian and because she relates to them and because she understands some things that we will never, that we can only imagine.
My last question. Eliana, what is your end game? What do you hope to achieve where you can close your book?
I'm not planning on closing my book anytime soon,
Okay.
but I also understand that that some of this work that I do is not sustainable on a personal level. That doing storytelling, running this project, co-running this project, going to the West Bank twice a week, interacting with occupation forces regularly, by seeing everything that's going on regularly, is a deeply exhausting job. Also, the fact that I can get paid for this is saying something, because most of the people who do this work are just activists who are volunteering. I don't plan on going anywhere right now. I think even eventually when I what is the phrase? Pass along the mantle, hand over the mantle, something about a mantle. To the next person who wants to take on this role, I will continue working with OFIC. I will do other work that is involved and related to ending the occupation and fighting for all of these values that we mentioned already. But my hope for myself and for the people who are doing this now, and also the next generation of activists, whenever that may be, is that even when things feel hopeless, because they certainly do, and there are days where I feel incredibly disillusioned and I really don't want to go just because I don't want to see it again, I want people to remember who they're working with. And I go because I want to see my friends. And I go because Hanadi just had a baby, or because someone's graduating high school, or anything that is human and real, that stands beyond and beside, because it's not outside of politics ever, but the kind of relationships that I've been so lucky to foster and to pursue through storytelling are what keeps so many people going back. Yes, it's political. Yes, we all are doing this because we believe in ending the occupation and because we have these more meta goals. But the reason we keep going back is because we form connections with people in a real way, that just like anywhere, just like any friend who I might want to visit, or any person who I want to hear an update on their life. So I don't see, unfortunately, I really don't know what the next era of this place will look like, what the next phase, or how we can move forward, because as I said, I'm not a political analyst and I'm not a diplomat, but I will keep going. And I hope that the other people come, that maybe someday you all will come and you'll meet some of these incredible people whose stories are invaluable to understanding this reality and in connecting with them. And they are the reason and in the most, and to fight together, to stand with them in their own struggle. Yeah.
Thank you.
You want to, Beverly, do you want to go ahead and finish things up? Because I'm mindful that we do at some point have to let Elia go to bed. What's that? You go, we'll pass it over. Oop. I think it's on now. Go ahead. Check it. Just tap on top. Nope, not on. Hold on. Hold on.
Hello?
Oh, you got it.
Okay. My name is Beverly Magid. My question is, right now, what could we give to you? What do you need that we could give to you to help your work? Is there anything?
That's a lovely question. I think there are initiatives that are taking place on the ground here that in an unfortunate way both either need people or money. Financial support for the work that is happening here is limited and incredibly valuable. I think, for example, like the program that I mentioned, Chvat Amim, it's taking place in 48, but it's an incredibly important educational and enriching experience. There's a project that is a graduate-run initiative of the Storytelling Project. The first cohort, which includes Basel of No Other Land and Hamdan, Hanadi's husband, Auda, this young man Ali, who I mentioned. These are some of the graduates of the first cohort, and they started a project called the Humans of Masafer Yatta. And they have an Instagram page and they have a Substack, and right now my coworker and I are working to get them some funding because they want to write regularly and they can't without being compensated because it takes up so much of their time. So something like the Humans of Masafer Yatta project or small initiatives nearby would benefit greatly from any kind of support, both just being seen and read and interacted with internationally, and financially supported would be incredibly valuable. And to share these stories. So talk to your friends and your family and tell them to go watch No Other Land and tell them to read some of these articles that I'll be more than happy to send. If that would be valuable to you, I could
It would be
share some
great,
links.
actually, if you would send these ideas about also where people can give. If you send them to me, I can relay them to the gang. Not a problem.
Absolutely.
I assume you get to the States from time to time. Because if you do,
Occasionally.
we'd love to have you here at Leobek Temple. Have you have a chance to meet us face to face. That would be a great treat. But in the meantime, you planning on being around in Jerusalem in the summer?
Part of the summer, yes.
Okay, July.
July, I will be here, yes. It's like
Outstanding.
the only month of the summer I'll be there.
Well, you may have to put up with some old Los Angeles rabbi bothering you. Because
Fantastic.
I'm going to be there and I want us to get a chance to get to know each other face to face.
I would love that.
So grateful to you, Alia, for your time tonight, and please go to bed.
And thank you all so much. This has been really so meaningful to me.
Many, many
My
thanks.
pleasure.
Good night. Laila Tov. Linda, thank you.
I'm thinking you probably want your granddaughter to go to the University of Michigan now.
Into the microphone. There are still people on TV. They need to hear you, or else they're left out of this conversation.
Live?
Yep.
Okay. My granddaughter last week with her dad and mother went to University of Wisconsin, Wake Forest, and University of Michigan, and she came back glowing about University of Michigan.
Yay.
So we'll see. She might be a Wolverine.
That's an extraordinary young woman. Wow.
She's a wow.
all I could think is, I want every one of my children to know her. That's all I could think. Is like, maybe how do I get them to know her? that was the thought. Really grateful, Linda, for introducing us to Elia and to her work.
I'm so grateful that we could do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a treat. And yeah, I hope that, she does have roots here in the States. Boy, she is so right. I'll tell you one thing she said that I want to amplify. When you are able to speak Hebrew with these folks, boy, do they get pissed. They are really angry at people who feel in enough, who would dare to cross them. Yeah, like, yeah, it's okay. It's the Narishkite Americans and people from Britain who want to come over here and who cares about them? But an Israeli who grew up there, who was born there, it is such a threat to that whole ethos. So I'm sure it was very instructive. She talked about, I don't necessarily introduce, she has the asset of being able to play American when she needs to. Because she's not playing, she is American. She's also Israeli. But she gets to play Israeli when it's helpful to be Israeli, and not to be Israeli when it's helpful to not be Israeli. Because, yeah, that is courageous work nowadays. I mean, the harassment that we took, they just wanted, nobody beat us, but boy, did they get angry at us. And boy, did they work to slow us down, curtail our program for the day, make sure we met as few people as possible, all the kinds of stuff that she talked about. We ran into in the one day we were there, one day. She's there twice a week. Pretty extraordinary. Seeing as how I have almost no sound left, I think maybe this would be a good time for us to call it a day. To those of you who joined us via the live stream, so grateful. I hope that you were as inspired as we were here. And we look forward to the next Topical Torah and see you around, hopefully with more voice and health.
Thank you.
Very nice. I'm hanging in.
Oh, Alan. Can I ask a question? I'd love you to be part of a team. Just over there and show me.
I don't have the time for that.
On a Saturday for 2.5 hours, have bagels with your boys?
Yeah, thank you.